A majority of Americans feel that the country is out of control. That's according to a new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll. The poll, which was conducted during the aftermath of George Floyd's death, and as the U.S. surpassed over 100,000 coronavirus deaths, found that 80% of Americans believe America is out of control. Only 15% say they think things are under control, and almost 6 in 10 voters say they are more concerned about the death of George Floyd and the actions of the police than they are about the violence that has broken out at times during recent protests. Broken down by party, that includes 81% of Democrats, 59% of independents, and 29% of Republicans. The NBC poll also has Joe Biden over Donald Trump nationally. Biden is ahead by 7 points, 49 to 42%. Those numbers are unchanged since April. And among voters living in those top battleground states, Joe Biden is up 8 points against the president, 50 to 42%. And more concerning for the Trump campaign specifically continues to be Michigan, a state that they've been worried about, as Jonathan Lemire has reported for some time. Well, in that state, President Trump trails Joe Biden by 12 points in the battleground state of Michigan in the newest Epic MRA poll. Biden sits at 53% to Donald Trump's 41% in the Great Lakes state. And among independents who usually decide Michigan's elections, Joe Biden leads Donald Trump by 40 percentage points, 63% to 23%. In 2016, of course, President Trump narrowly won Michigan by less than 1 percentage points. Donnie, there are so many cross currents. The pandemic, which has now killed twice as many people than died in combat in Vietnam or died in combat during World War I, and those numbers continue to grow. And health officials fear these protests will cause those numbers to spike even more as we move forward. And then, of course, you have June the 1st, what happened on June the 1st in Lafayette Park. You know, you and I and Willie and Mika and everybody that's on this show, we always talk about how it's early. These polls are, and June is early. It's not March or April, but June still is early because of the belief that things can change in a week's time in American politics. But some of those numbers, if you look inside, some of those numbers with women, with people in the suburbs, with independents, those numbers are hardening and over 3.5 years, not just over the past 3 weeks. And on the other side of it, these protests are engaging and energizing Black Americans in a way the Trump campaign was hoping Joe Biden could not. So it seems that from both sides, the white suburbs, that the educated voters, all of these women, all of these people that were running away from Donald Trump over the past 3 years, they were hoping that would be offset by getting 15-20% of the Black vote or by depressing the Black vote. Right now, at least in June, in early June, none of that seems likely or even plausible.
You know, I want to go back to Joe, to all of that, and that one number that 80% of this country thinks we are out of control. That concept of control is such an important thing that literally 4 out of 5 Americans think we are out of control. The president is out of control. Also, I'm sure you're going to get to this a little bit later, a Political Morning Consult poll, just about 70% think we are seriously on the wrong track. Those are stunning numbers, whether you're in March, April, May, June, July, or August. Those are powerful, powerful numbers. And the thing that I think plays so against the president, everybody's been so worried about Joe Biden. Is he the right guy? I think he's the perfect guy. He is comfort. We have a drunk driver. He's the designated driver to get us home. Right now, if I was going to use one word to describe the entire populace of this country, it's anxious. We are all anxious. We watched last Monday, and I think that was the pinnacle. That was a crescendo. We keep saying, wow, it can't get any worse. Trump cannot dig a deeper grave. He did last Monday when he stepped up to the American people and said, if you disagree with me, I will dominate you. I will have the military by my side. Oh, and by the way, God is on my side also, as he stood there with the upside down Bible. So, the other numbers I want to just also point out, I always say follow the money. And in the futures betting market, where Wall Street, where the money is betting, interestingly enough, Trump is trailing by 7 points, the same number that's in all the national polls. So no matter what metric you look at, Trump is in desperate trouble. And what's interesting, you talked about this also at the top of the hour, that the Trump people are starting to think about, what is our slogan? Is it renewal? Is it the comeback kid? You can't slogan your way out of this. And that is a big, big, big problem for a guy who's built his entire raison d'etre on sloganing.
Well, the problem is, again, the back-to-back crises, the pandemic crisis, a once-in-a-century healthcare crisis, and which most Americans think he reacted poorly to, according to the polls. And then the worst crisis is in terms of race relations and law enforcement in 50 years. Also, he's doing very badly in most polls there. And along those lines, thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.